Travel.Radio.
Well, it's been a bit of a roller coaster week for the travel industry. And yes, I know most of you that are listening from the industry are probably going to say, well, what's new? But with countries that are moving on and off the green list and the government announcing no quarantine for double vaccinated travellers returning from amber list countries, there's quite a lot for us to wrap our heads around. But luckily for you listeners, I'm joined today by one of travel's whiz queens who makes it her business to serve up the latest news, inspiration, and information to the British public. She heads up one of the UK's most formidable travel media teams and can often be seen on our TV screens sharing insights on what's happening in the world. We're very lucky to have her on the show today. It's the head of travel at the Telegraph, Claire Irvin. Claire, thanks for joining this afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Brian. And it's great to be here. Thanks very much for asking me.
No, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. So, question for you, Claire. How is everything over at the Telegraph? It's obviously been a bit of a roller coaster for the whole of the travel industry, but I can imagine it's been really tough for you guys keeping up with all the changing news and announcements that have been going on.
Yeah, well, I think you can safely say that there's never a dull moment. And, certainly as much as my fears of staring into the abyss of a travel-free world at the beginning of the first lockdown did come true, my concerns about what on earth the team would do all that time actually have never come to fruition, because we have never been busier. We've never had to be so on the pulse of what's going on. We've never had to, I'm starting to really loathe this word, but pivot so many times.
Yes.
We've really, we always pride ourselves on knowing what our readers need from us, but that's changed so rapidly and so frequently over that 18 months. And I don't think ever have we had to think on our feet and be so creative, ironically, even though there's been very little travel, as we have for the past 18 months.
No, I can imagine. Yeah, it's been really topsy-turvy for sure.
Yeah.
Everything that's changing. So I want to pick your brains today about what travellers are looking for, the feedback that you see from your readers. But before we get into all of that, I just want to take a quick look at the latest announcements that we've had over the past week or so with amber list, no quarantine, the changes midweek from the green list. There's loads for travellers just to try and get their heads around.
Gosh, isn't there? And, we on the desk have been starting to look at our own summer plans. And, the thing I hear most frequently is, well, if I can't understand this, how are any of our readers going to? And that's indeed, that reflects how I feel. I've booked a couple of trips over the last week or so, and it's so confusing. And, it's quite anxiety making, because, it's not even about getting your head around what you've got to do. It's then making sure that you've done it. It's making sure you've got everything lined up, and there's so many things that are not within our control. Will the testing company get the test to me on time? Will the results come to me on time? Will border control be able to read it? Have I got the same name on my COVID passport as on my passport? As I discovered a couple of weeks ago, we broke that story through my own personal travel anxiety. So I would not blame anybody for thinking twice before travelling this summer. I really wouldn't. Even in the UK, is the pandemic going to mean that my hotel's even open? So the good news is that through all of that, and indeed throughout the whole ordeal, the one constant positive for us has been that our readers do want to get travelling. There is this demand. It's not a figment of our imaginations as the industry and us over on the media. There really is a demand to go away. Holidays remain just as, if not more important to our readers as they ever were. It's just, how they go about that is changing. And, it would be very irresponsible of me to say that their confidence has not been damaged. And not just by the pandemic, because I think that's something that's out of all of our hands. And I think everybody understands that extraordinary measures are required. Nobody wants to travel, putting other people or themselves at risk. But, the flip-flopping, the confusion, the chaos, the fact that the government so blatantly doesn't understand how important holidays are to their electorate, how people go on holiday, or indeed how the travel industry that supports them even works, you know, and they have not seemed very keen to listen or learn on any of those points, which has been a great frustration to all of us. I think I speak probably for listeners as well when I say that. So, you know, the way that our readers approach travel, so the pent-up demand remains, but how they approach that does fluctuate with the news agenda, with virus rates, with what the restrictions are, domestically and overseas, you know. And for example, with every new variant, we are seeing an immediate dip in confidence.
Sure.
And that desire to travel changes from desiring to travel immediately to perhaps some point in the future. But then again, on the flip side, you know, with every addition to the green list, that confidence starts to grow. I think hopefully, you know, our readers and you know, British travellers are going to have fairly short memories, because holidays will, you know, the need for holidays will override that sort of trauma. You know, and this new announcement this week about Monday's change to the amber list quarantine rules, you know, of course is going to have a positive effect. You know, it's immediately had a positive effect. If I just speak for myself and the team, we've been able to book trips that we weren't able to before because we couldn't quarantine. There's now less difference between both the cost and the faff around green list and amber list travel. So, you know, the destinations we've seen this, you know, this week, the Balearics has come off the green watch list. I mean, you know, what is the green watch list, for goodness sake? But they've come off that and onto the amber list. And I went ahead and booked, you know, a trip to an amber list destination. I think people have continued to do that because I'm double vaxxed, so I won't need to quarantine. Now, assuming that the Foreign Office is not advising against travel to a destination, because this, of course, is another mitigating factor that so often we forget, which, you know, if the Foreign Office removes that advice not to travel, of course, people can travel if they're double vaxxed, fully insured. So, you know, that's another big plus point. So I'm waffling on. To summarise where we're at the moment, green list countries require no quarantine on return to the UK. You will need to take a pre-departure PCR test before returning to England, and a post-arrival PCR test. Sorry, a pre-departure test doesn't have to be PCR, but your post-arrival test does. See, even I'm confused, and I'm living this, and I've got it written down in front of me. And amber list, pre-departure tests before returning to England can be lateral flow, but then 2 post-arrival tests, so day 2 and day 8.
Yeah.
So, and that's from Monday. Of course, if you're not double vaxxed, you will still have to quarantine for up to 10 days. So whilst old people like me are getting very excited about, you know, we mustn't forget that there is a huge chunk of our travelling public, you know, namely the 18 to 30-year-olds who are still unable to travel. And, you know, that's really regrettable for them. You know, it's another summer lost for them. Of course, red countries remain compulsory hotel quarantine on return. And at the moment, there's a lot of speculation around a couple of destinations on the green list, which they think could immediately go red, which seems to completely go against what the traffic light system should stand for. So more confusion.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's part of the issue as well, is that you hear these things slowly rumbling out as hearsay, and then it becomes rumour, and that just adds to anxiety, I think, you know, for travellers. They then start to think, well, actually, 1 minute I think I'm okay, but then there's this noise in the background. Is it going? And it becomes a lottery in some respects. So
and do you know what? We have a real moral dilemma around all of this on the desk, because, you know, and we do have to sort of really think through all of those rumours, because if we don't, we have a moral obligation to our readers to give them all the information that's available to us. So if there is a rumour that a destination is going to go red list, and it's, you know, particularly if it's one of the big 5, which there is at the moment, you know, we really need to let them know that that is being talked about as a possibility. At the same time, you don't want to fuel those fires.
Yes.
And what I did I'm going through the regulations, of course, those are just the regulations in terms of leaving and returning to the UK. You do, of course, need to check the destination that you're travelling to. So, for example, at the moment, it's still requiring 5 days quarantine for Brits. So, yeah.
It is, yes, yeah, without a doubt. And it's interesting as well, because there's lots of people from the travel industry. So I was talking to Lisa McCauley from Silver Travel Advisor this morning. She just literally come back from a quick trip to Mallorca.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's that anxiety of, I've got to get all of these tests done, the forms have got to be filled out correctly, etc. So it sounds like a mountain, you know, in terms of what's to be done, and a lot of faff maybe in that respect. But it was interesting talking to her, and Julia Lobu Said from Advantage has said something similar, is actually it's not as difficult as people think it's going to be. It's actually quite straightforward, but it's the anxiety of doing it on. I think that's the message that we've got to try and purvey to the travelling public, is actually, it does sound like there's a lot to do, but there are, you know, systems in place, places set up to cope to do all of these things. And actually, when you do it, it's fairly straightforward. But the problem is there's not enough people doing it for the public to understand, well, actually, it's, you know, once you get into it and start on that path. And that's easier for us to say that are based in travel, because we're used to having to do all of this stuff because we travel so much. But that's the next big thing for me, message-wise, is to really purvey that across in terms of, yes, you've got to do all these things, but it's not as scary as maybe you think it is to get all of this organised. So,
and you know, the travel industry can really help with that, you know. So what we've done is online, we have step-by-step guides, general guides. So this is what you have to do here then, and here's some places you could go to, because of course, you know, we have to retain our independence, and you know, we don't want to show any bias, but tour operators can actually help, you know, their customers by being even more specific. So, well, if you're going on this day at this time, this is what you need to be doing. So you know, so travellers can actually diarise all of that. You can partner up with testing companies and give some kind of guarantee that they're actually going to, you know, receive their test when they need it and get the results when they need it. And I think, you know, I think one of the positives, and I've said this all the way through, that will come out of this. I mean, obviously, you know, I'm all for independent adventure, but I think actually eventually this will be good news for tour operators, because people will remember the benefit of investing a small amount in certainty and, you know, lack of anxiety and worries and just smooth running of your travel arrangements.
No, for sure. Yeah, I totally agree. You know, we, especially for us in the adventure sector, you know, you've got a lot of people that, you know, ordinarily might have gone backpacking independently to a lot of the destinations that we feature, and what we definitely seeing is a trend of people reining back from that and realizing that actually traveling with a company like Gadventures that takes care of every single facet of that tour. You're with a chief experience officer, which is a tour guide in our parlance, every single hour of every single day. Is that security as well, that if things happen on the ground, you know, we look after them, we, you know, take care of all of those things, so that really what they need to worry about is just having a great time whilst on holiday. And I think you're right, the tour operators, that's their strength, always has been. And I think the traveling public starting to realise that actually, you know, you can do these things, but we've seen already with the pandemic how disruptive things can be, and going with a reliable operator does, without a doubt, I think, you know, really ring true now more so than ever. And with all of these changes, you know, especially for the travellers, you know, there's some companies saying that they've seen a boost in bookings. You know, do you think that we'll see travellers hopping on planes to amber-list countries in the coming weeks, or do you think there'll be a bit of a slower burn, you know, as confidence starts to come back, hopefully?
Well, I think it depends who you are, and that's not me sitting on the fence, but I think, you know, people who have already booked will definitely think twice about cancelling for sure, you know, because they'll feel, you know, more confident. I suspect it will be a slower burn for much older travellers who you know, have carried the hopes of the summer on their shoulders, being the first to be double vaxxed. But I think insurance is a worry for them. You know, they can't always get the specialist insurance that they require. They're concerned about what would happen if they end up having to use their GHIC. You know, I'm going through this with my parents at the moment, who are some of the most adventurous septuagenarians I've ever come across, but even they, you know, are thinking twice about travel this summer. And as I said earlier, you know, younger travellers you know, the cost is going to increase exponentially because they haven't just got the test; they've then got to take an extra 5 days holiday, work from home, or potentially miss work. So I think we will see a slow rise in bookings. But you know, we've been keeping a really close eye on prices and bookings straight after these announcements, and we aren't seeing that same spike that we saw back at Easter when it was first. You know, Portugal, for example, first became a green list. Remember those days? So yeah, I think a slow burn, and also, you know, I think there's a huge, for every kind of traveller group, there's a huge element at the moment of peer confidence. If they see other people doing it and coming back, and they know of other people, they get recommendations, you know, or they just sort of remember through hearsay how brilliant holidays are, then I think
that,
you know,
definitely plays.
A slow burn.
No, we just literally have ran our 250th trip.
Wow.
Last week it was in Egypt, and I think that for us, and you know, we post a lot about that on our social media channels, because I think that, to your point, is really important, that people see other people traveling. It gives confidence in which to travel. And you know, for us, we've been running those tours since some point, you know, back at whenever travel started to come back. We're very fortunate, we're a global company, so we have travellers from all over the world, which allows us to be able to get up and operational, because that's a really big thing as well, is that, you know, lots of companies have been dormant through this period and not able to operate. Luckily for us, the fact that we are up and running allows us to be able to open up inventory, run tours confidently, knowing that they're going to operate, because we have travellers already booked on and moving. So I think you're right. I think all companies that are up and running need to propagate that message out to give other consumers the confidence to see, you know, actually I'm desperate to go. It's going to happen, isn't it? And when they see other people traveling, I think you're right. It just gives them that boost and confidence.
We need a bit of healthy holiday envy as well.
Oh, listen, I'm struggling with that massively. I keep seeing people go and place. I'm like, oh, I just need to get some, you know, adventure back into my life, which will happen for sure. PCR tests, you know, there's a lot, you know, these things. Do you think these will pose a challenge, you know, because of the costs?
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly they will. Yeah, because, you know, so when we talked about insurance, that's more expensive for many people at the moment. There's limited availability in many of the green and amber list destinations, which is increasing cost on the holiday itself. And then to layer that with these, you know, ridiculously pumped up PCR tests in the UK anyway, it's just ludicrous. I mean, I'm still completely baffled as to why lateral flow tests, which are now free and freely available, and you know, deemed reliable enough to provide protection in every other walk of life, including education, including health, aren't permitted for international travel.
Crazy, yeah.
When the you know, it has been proven that you know, the rates of virus being carried by international travel are really, really low. It's absolutely crazy. And, you know, the cost of those tests is nothing but a scandal. I mean, it's profiteering on a really immoral level, I think. And all you need to do is travel. So pre-lockdown, last year, at the end of last year, we were lucky enough to be in the Maldives. And in the Maldives, you know, desert islands, PCR tests were £40 and you got your results within an hour.
Yeah.
And you compare that to the UK.
I know, yeah. We were talking to somebody literally 2 days ago that's travelling to Greece, and a PCR test for €20.
Yeah.
So it does make a mockery of, and I think the government, I know we're lobbying hard as an industry on this specific subject, but I think the government have to step in. If they're going to dictate where the PCR tests need to be taken, they have, I think, a moral obligation as a government to make these, the fees, bring them down to, an affordable level for everybody to travel, without a doubt.
I completely agree. I mean, we've got, we've got features on test companies that we highly recommend, and I'd recommend anyone that's traveling to look at those, because there are some very reliable operators out there, which are competitively priced, but I think the government needs to either, if it is indeed that expensive to run those tests, and maybe it is, I haven't got insider knowledge on that, then the government needs to find some kind of support for them.
They do, yeah. So anyway, less about all of that now. Let's talk about your readers. So they're huge fans of travel.
They certainly
and I believe they're also quite adventurous too.
They are. So we have a huge number of solo travellers, for example, who come to us for advice on that. But, whether... And we are so lucky that our readers range from 18 to over 80, and pretty much all of those want a bit of adventure in their travel. Some of them want really very exciting thrills and spills in their holiday. But I think particularly now, what people are looking for is an experience. Is not just they've had quite a lot of time, I wouldn't say relaxing, but sort of sitting down perhaps, or being in the same place, and they want that sense of adventure, the adrenaline, a really memorable experience. And whatever their budget, we're finding that people it was always a big thing for us, but it's even bigger.
I think we see that through lockdown as well, in terms of the types of searches that were made on our website, and then the bookings, especially through the pandemic, where you couldn't do anything. The only thing you could do was go out for a walk. So things like Kilimanjaro, Base Camp Everest, etc., suddenly shooting to the top, because I think you're right. And I do think people will change coming out of this. To your very point, is, don't get me wrong, I think there's going to be a rush of people just want to get sunshine on their backs and do nothing for a period. But conversely, all I ever get told, and maybe it is because I run an adventure company that they tell me this, but so many people tell me that coming out of this, the experience is going to be the key thing that everyone wants to do, is want to get out overseas, but actually go and experience the destination in a much deeper, more meaningful way than maybe they would have done in the past, because travel just got taken away from them.
Yeah, and I think it's as well, it's there's so much to that. There's when we first went to, as I say, we were away in the winter, and there were so many things that we realised that we'd missed. Not just the excitement of going away, not just the sense of being somewhere different, not just amazing weather and just beautiful scenery, but there was that connection with, and it sounds twee, but it's so important, connection with other people. That sense of mixing with people from different cultures, from different who have something else to say, have something, and a very different experience of life. And and that is an adventure in itself, before you even layer it with thrill seeking, or huge explorations, or that sense of discovery, all of which adventure trips will give, and which I think have become even more important to people who've been subject to the same four walls for 18 months.
Totally agree with you. And just a quick one on like UK travel, because lots of people have fallen back in love again with the UK. Most because we've had no choice. At the end of the day, just couldn't go anywhere in that past year. And you guys have served up some great domestic content over the past year. Do you think that trend will continue, or do you actually think people are itching to just get back overseas again eventually?
Well, do you know what? I hope it's a bit of both, because we're so lucky, aren't we? We live in this really, really diverse island, I should say, which offers up such a huge there aren't many places in the world where within a relatively small square mileage, you have, such a wide variety of holiday types, of landscape, of people, of culture. And so I really hope people have fallen back in love long time with the UK, because it has got so much to offer. And of course, there's lots of other things about that. It's much better for the environment if you can holiday domestically every now and again, and it's great for our economy and all these things. I do think but all those things considered, what I've always found incredible is that so many people just don't know how to holiday in the UK. They just literally don't know where to start, because they think it means a sort of tired seaside town, for example, perhaps Cornwall. And so we've run quite a few features on actually how you go about finding and how to holiday in the UK. And I think that's great. I think obviously Booked Up Britain is exactly what the hospitality industry needs at the moment, so also that's really good and supporting that huge part of our travel industry. There's a couple of risks. I hope that the busyness of our honeypots is not going to deter people from returning to those, because I think that can be quite off-putting. Traffic is going to be a problem. Restaurant availability is potentially going to be a problem. So I hope that as an industry, the hospitality industry can overcome that, and the pandemic, and not having trained up staff and all these other obstacles they've got. I also sort of feel like the government hasn't massively helped that, for all their there's been sort of conspiracy theories that the traffic light system is just a way of keeping people and the pound in the UK. And it's an interesting way to brand your country, isn't it, as the place you holiday when you are imprisoned there. I really think that, again, they've kind of missed a beat there on how to present it, and I just hope that as an industry, UK hospitality can overcome that. And really, the beauty of the UK, what it's got to offer in terms of food, experiences, welcomes, people, will all overcome that. And adventure, of course. There's this huge thrills and spills to be had in the UK.
Sure, yeah. And what do you think? What do you think, from your perspective, is the biggest change you've seen in your readers' travel habits since the pandemic?
Well, as I said, confidence, and I think that's going to lead to less independent travel. I think, as I said earlier, it's going to mean a move to using tour operators as a matter of course and booking with them. I think readers will be much more savvy over booking terms and conditions, and they will be looking for flexibility within those. And I think, for a lot of people, there'll be a focus on what is the healthcare system that would back me up if anything went wrong, and also how do I get home? So really very, unsexy changes there, I think, but great news for tour operators in terms of going forward. I think, they're going to become a very crucial part of our readers' holiday habits.
Definitely. And pricing, your readers willing to spend a decent amount on holidays anyway, pre-pandemic. Do you think they're going to be looking to spend, what they've saved on a big blowout holiday, like, say, for instance, Antarctica? I mean, that's top of the bucket list as such. Or do you think they'll spread it over multiple, holidays?
Well, do you know what? I think we're going to see a bit of both. I think there will be less middle ground travel is what will happen. So you'll have people who are a bit nervous about putting, because let's face it, I've probably got as much money in airlines at the moment as I have in my equity in my home. So, people have got already a lot of money with travel operators. And I think there will be a certain part of our readership who are thinking, I haven't got any more to put in there at the moment, and I'm a bit worried it's going to go wrong. I'm going to just, easy does it. We'll just spend bits and bobs here and see how it goes. I think there will also be as many, if not huge amounts more people who, you know, our readers, by the by, a lot of them are very lucky and haven't been negatively impacted by the pandemic financially. So they have got a holiday pot to draw on. And I think they will be putting that holiday pot into the most blow the budget, bespoke, supported, incredible experiences that they just know are not going to go wrong. Or if they do, you know, if something gets in the way, they can just move it really easily. That if they're away, then they have somebody on hand to call if they're worried about anything, and they are just having, you know, the biggest blowout celebration of freedom ever. So I think, you know, in the midterm, we'll see less in the middle, and we'll see people, either, as you say, people having lots of shorter, less expensive breaks, but, you know, a huge chunk of our readers are going to be going hell for leather to get away in the greatest style that they can possibly afford.
Yeah, no, we see that as well. You know, with multi-generational trips where, you know, families are reconnecting and saying, right, you know what, it comes back to that experience and creating memories that you spoke about earlier. Is, you know, safaris for us as an example, you know, booking well in advance, and that's people saying, you know what, it's been on a list, we wanted to do that, and you know what this pandemic has definitely made me realize is we've got to go and do it. And that's why I think we're seeing so many people booking these sort of achievement-based holidays, like climbing Kilimanjaro or you know, Inca Trail treks, etc. Because everyone has them on a list of, you know, everyone I speak to says to me, and I'm going to mention it again, and everyone's going to go, here we go again, Kilimanjaro. But loads of people talk to me about the fact that we did Kilimanjaro, and they all, bar none, say to me, do you know what, that's on my list of something I'd love to do.
Yeah.
And that, it's on my list of something I'd love to do, has changed to soon as, like, I'm ready to go. Because I think I realised that life's too short. You know, pandemics took all of that dreaming away to some degree, and people are now realising, do you know what, actually, in this time, it's made me realise that forget this, it's something I'd like to do. I'm going to make this happen, which I think, to your point about people having a blowout, going further afield, whatever that is for them, I definitely think that's going to come as things start to properly open up, and less of the everything that we spoke about earlier on. Which brings me nicely on to, you know, your role. And your team's role is all around inspiring people to travel, and to get the very best out of travel. Why? And to get the very best out of travel, why do you think that's important? And what does travel offer us in your eyes?
Well, I mean, if ever a year and a half's highlighted the need for travel in our lives, it's this one, isn't it? You know, it's not just about escape and R&R and, you know, and sunshine, although all those things are very important to actual health as well as our mental health. But, you know, we talked earlier about connection and meeting new people, having new experiences and some adventure, you know, and that sort of, you know, I think what not being able to do any of those things has highlighted is that these aren't just treats. You know, they're a really necessary part of the way that the world works, about how we communicate with people from different countries and cultures. But, you know, they're also a really important part of our individual mental health. And, you know, they're important. They aren't sort of just, you know, something to be dismissed as a mere frippery. That, you know, they are central to how we live and how we operate healthily.
No, I agree. Yeah, no, 100%. And you know, it's interesting you say that. So there's a friend of mine who's just gone on holiday to Malta. He is Maltese anyway, and he's posted relentlessly pictures and such likes whilst he's been away. I have part of my family's from Malta, and just seeing him going around places, eating food, you know, that's traditional, it really, really hit home for me how much I miss travelling. But even more important, made me realise how much I miss Malta as an island and family and friends and everything. And it's made me determined that, you know, I'm going to get back onto the island to see everyone and get back going again, travel. And it's those, like you say, it's those connections of just getting away and mixing and experiencing that are so vital.
And I think, you know what, on that, it's sort of almost the same as you know, seeing friends and mixing with people. Is, I think, if you didn't have a terrible lockdown experience, then perhaps, you know, some people started to get into a mindset where they thought, well, you know, actually, if you were lucky enough to have space and your family around you and everyone was well, you know, you might have been forgiven for thinking, well, this is all right. Is not having to get to commute or having to see people, that's a certain kinds of stresses. But actually, the minute you start doing it again, you remember why you have friends, why you love your family. And I think travel's a bit the same as that. You know, the more you do, the more you remember how important it is. And the more you see other people doing it.
100%. Yeah, no, without, I mean, you know, I cannot wait to get on a plane and just travel again. And it's ridiculous. I used to travel every 2 weeks without fail, constantly on aeroplanes, up at 4 o'clock to get to Heathrow. You know, at the time it was it was my job, and you didn't think anything of it. I'm actually really excited about, to get on a plane and travel. And the real thing that was heartbreaking this week is I, for the first time since March, went through Gatwick South Terminal. I was the only person in the terminal. I literally got off a train and ran up just to go and see what the vibe was in the terminal. And it broke my heart. It's empty, it's shut down. And I'm looking at this thinking, I used to live in this airport, the vibe of it, everything about it. And to see it where it's at is heartbreaking. So the quicker we get these things going again and these experiences and the excitement of travel, the better for me.
Absolutely.
Now, if the world were to open up and there were no restrictions, what's the one trip or place that you'd love to visit?
Oh my goodness. You know what? This is so there's so you talking about Malta. I feel the same about Switzerland. You know, I've got some of my closest friends live there, and I haven't been there for too long, even before the pandemic, and I just can't wait to get back. So that's definitely on my list. Blimey, where else would I really love to go to? Well, I had some trips booked, which I'm really keen to do, do you know what? I really want to go to the Galapagos Islands. And I think that was somewhere that we kept putting off because it was so far and so extreme. You know, and I had trips booked, we had to cancel to Canada and to Sri Lanka and to South Africa, and all of those places I can't wait to go back to. But the place that's really on my list, I guess, would be the Galapagos. While the kids are just, I mean, it's always going to be just so full of awe and wonder, but, you know, while they're still young enough for it to be something otherworldly, I think that would definitely be up there.
Well,
great.
You know where to come, Claire, when you're ready for that. Gadventures has some amazing tours and sailing in the Galapagos Islands, so make sure you give me a call. Excellent. Well, Claire, thank you so much for taking time out to join us on the show. Really, really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you. So to close out, what would be a song that you'd like me to play for you on the show?
Well, on a travel tip, I'm going to Ibiza next week. That was the first trip that I've booked with the family. But there's just, so Another Chance by Roger Sanchez is a real travel tune for me. It just sums up so many poolside days, boats, trips, you know, and sunshine. And I am hoping Ibiza's got a lot of all of that in store for me next week.
You know, I can't believe you just said that. I can tell you a tale about Roger Sanchez and Ibiza. I was there years ago when I was the regional manager for a tour operator at the time, and I had all my area managers fly into Ibiza for a 2-day meeting. And on the last day, we finished at lunchtime and we went down to, there's a beach bar called the Jockey Club. And he owns Cafe Mambo and a few other places in Ibiza. He joined us for lunch and we were sat there looking out over the sea. And he said to us, do you want to take all the guys on a speedboat? He said, I'll just get whoever is chappie that looked after his speedboat. I'll get him to bring it here and we'll just go over to Formentera for the rest of the day. We're like, yeah, no, that'd be amazing. Yeah. He gets on his mobile phone. He comes back and says, no, we can't do it. I'm like, why? he said the speedboat's out and it's already over in Formentera because there's Roger Sanchez is taking a boat for the day.
Oh.
So it's really bizarre that you just like, one, you're going to Ibiza, two, that you mentioned that person as well. But there we go. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having me. It's lovely to see you.
And you.
Changing the world just by having the time of your life sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? But when you travel with Gadventures, that's exactly what you're doing. Our small group tours were built to directly benefit the people and places they visit. So on top of having an incredible, immersive, one-of-a-kind travel experience, you'll also be doing your parts to make the world a better place. Ask your travel agent or visit Gadventures.com to learn more about the power of your travel plans and to book your next life-changing experience. Travel.